Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. Momentarily, I will be joined by Noah Healy. We'll be discussing marketplace design. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits as well as high net worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Noah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here, Bruce.
It is my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
So my name is Noah Healy. I'm an expert on algorithm development, and I have become an expert on marketplace design.
Define for me, and if I didn't say it, I apologize. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time. What do you mean by marketplace?
So marketplaces are an ancient concept. It's a common area for trade to occur. In the modern setting, and the modern market is one of the beginning institutions of modern life. It is a financial institution that allows people to negotiate prices in an environment where there are multiple potential buyers and sellers, which has both benefits and drawbacks. The benefits are that with bilateral competition, much more accurate pricing and much more useful pricing becomes available, and the drawback is that it becomes much more complicated to actually navigate the system.
I asked the question because my initial reaction was this was just a fancy way of saying website design. Since most people today not most, but many conduct business on the web, and therefore the web is their marketplace.
That has become increasingly common, and in fact, one of the drawbacks of the webification is that many of the larger web retailers are attempting to draw our existing marketplace transactions into their web retail space, which is much more difficult than they estimate it to be, which is quite fortunate because it's also very, very dangerous should they succeed.
What would you say are the major concerns, a word differently, the major mistakes companies make when designing their marketplace?
Well, the primary difficulty that people currently encounter is this falsified belief that by simply allowing competition to exist, whatever happens is the best thing that could happen. Competition actually needs to be fairly curated and well prescribed in order to actually achieve good outcomes. If you think about sports are very heavily regulated, not just in the sense that there are a lot of laws and so on that encompass professional sporting teams, but also the games themselves are officiated generally reasonably tightly. There's broad compliance with the rules that exist, and the rules themselves are tweaked almost constantly in order to create an environment where what is intended to be the outcome, the production of very high achieving, demonstrations of ability, are what's actually happening. Many people effectively believe that you can forego all of that when it comes to finance, and so we see some very public blow-ups, like the Sam Bankman-Fried issue, where their marketplace was simply a criminal enterprise, to other public but different kinds of blow-ups, like the various bubble crash cycles that we've been seeing with increasing frequency over the last several decades at places like the New York Stock Exchange, the London Metals Exchange, the CME Group, as those markets themselves can't really keep up with the information load that the internet provides.
If you are attempting to regulate your competition, doesn't that get you into trouble with antitrust regulations?
Well, that's what gets interesting about true marketplace design. The market is essentially the forum within which it is possible for large-scale cooperation to occur. So it is the only forum where the antitrust systems actually allow that behavior. But that for that to work, you have to regulate so that competition is actually occurring. And there does actually need to be a disinterested third party that operates a marketplace that doesn't care who the winners and losers among various supply and demand players are.
I've always found it interesting that when a company decides to compete, they name their competitors, because you're only going to name a competitor who's large, quality, and who you want to be compared with. But the minute you do that, you're giving that company a special status. You're saying they're the best, we're trying to become them. Or we believe we're already equal to them, and sometimes it backfires. So you have a Verizon T-Mobile competition. And then all of a sudden, one day, T-Mobile is no longer mentioning Verizon because T-Mobile is now the big guy. Years ago, you had Avis and Hertz, and Hertz was number one. And Avis's slogan, tagline was, "We're number two, we try harder." And while the two of them were going at it, Enterprise became the largest rent-a-car company. So they were knocking themselves out in the ring, not noticing that a third fighter had joined the group. You're involved, if I'm understanding you correctly, mainly with financial services. So do you have the same situation where I don't know, one bank doesn't want to mention another, or one trading company doesn't want to mention another by name?
My situation is actually fairly different from that. So what I am involved in is design, and specifically the design of the price discovery mechanism, because that's where algorithmic interest actually has some sway. And there is zero competition in current algorithmic design price discovery. The entire planet's been using the same system since the Renaissance, more or less. Well, probably the whole planet's been using the same system since the period of British imperialism, when they brought that system that had conquered Europe to the rest of the world. But the algorithm that is under use by every single major and minor market right now is effectively identical. There's been very little innovation within that space outside of what I'm presently engaged in. And so when I'm talking about these companies, I'm talking about them less as my competition and more as possible clients.
So what is different about your approach? What makes you unique?
So the fundamental deal structure is about the bringing together of a buyer and a seller. And so the buyer has currency and information, and the seller has a product and information. And what I have done is found a way to remove the information requirement from that. So creating a three-sided coming together prospect of information, product, and currency, and then been able to create specialized markets for each of those three roles, which allows all of them to converge on a common interest.
Your service, I don't know if an algorithm is best described as a service or a product. I will leave that up to you. You're trying to find the sweet point in the graph that we all know about of how much is someone willing to pay.
That, yes, the crossing point of the supply and demand curves are the ultimate goal and product slash service of financial institutions. What we've been seeing over the last quarter to half century with computerization in finance is that the financial community has been growing relative to the general economy. And so if you just think about that supply and demand crossover point, if you were to magnify into that graph, what's actually going on is that there's a sort of a plateau where the middlemen are sort of running back and forth between those supply and demand curves. And what we've seen occur is that that plateau has widened. And so we're backing off. We're still approaching that crossing point, but we can't get as close as we used to get. And the problem is noise overload in the system. And so what I discovered is a way to focus the information qualities of the system to reduce noise, allowing markets to get much closer to that crossing point.
Does everyone have access to this information? Everyone, I mean anyone involved with financial services.
Uh, what I'm doing is public. It has not yet been patented. The patent office is trying very hard to see that it doesn't get patented for reasons that they decline to explain. So in that sense, what I'm doing is generally available. On adoption of my system, the information provided by market systems is pretty much by definition public because that's the entire point of their operation.
So everyone basically has the information. And your algorithm, patent pending, unique to you, uses that information in a way that is different from other service providers. Now,
That is correct, but just for
okay,
clarity,
yeah.
a market would use this algorithm to operate to generate that information. Without the market information being plugged in, the algorithm is sort of spinning its wheels.
So my question is, can this design, to use your word, for your marketplace be adapted to any marketplace, a retail store or retail manufacturer, for example, or a service provider?
So this is specific to the requirements of having this competitive bilateral circumstance. Retail stores are a bad match for that because retail stores aren't really in the problem of competing with other people within their stores. So the retail space uses a much simpler cost plus markup mechanism, and then relies on sort of the general uh, uh, personal actions to define these differences. The reason that's not a good fit in the financial commodification space is that it does not capture large amounts of external information that is pertinent. And so a cost plus style pricing wouldn't capture things like disasters on the other side of the world that actually should cause you to raise your prices considerably in order to regulate demand appropriately and encourage reinvestment to improve capacity.
Can your algorithm make predictions?
So my algorithm actually works by making predictions, but it makes predictions out of the inputs of the client users. It doesn't generate information. It integrates information in a less noisy way than the way the current algorithm does that. The underlying mathematics of my system, what I call negotiation games, it does have applications to other spaces, and you can use it to make other kinds of prediction markets, ones that would either be, in some cases, self-funding, but in most cases would be funded. So a person interested in gaining access to presently available or future available information could design prediction systems or communication systems that they would fund that would then create incentives to bring that information to them in as timely and as effective a manner as possible.
What I was thinking about it were the two incidents at Target, not the hacking, the opposite, where a woman who had been trying to get pregnant for many years received a receipt, and on the top it had all sorts of baby products, coupons from babies. She was very upset and very offended. Uh, and they explained to her that based on their algorithm, what she's been purchasing is what mothers to be purchase. And turns out she was pregnant. And then there was the father who was beside himself, came in screaming, "Why are you sending my daughter all these things about uh, for newborns?" And he was not happy. You got to give him credit. He went back and apologized. His daughter was pregnant. So there is, but that's not analogous to what you do. Yours.
No, that's not a particular area of interest for me in this context. But yeah, that's one of the scary and intrusive things about the amount of information that's actually out there. It is possible to make very sort of Sherlock Holmes style deductions about people, just because of the enormous number of breadcrumbs. The purpose of the marketplace is to attempt to gather these sorts of information, but to boil them all down into one number that encompasses everything that's economically relevant. And that one number is price. And so in a properly functioning marketplace, people with these insights are making their own judgments about their economic relevance and then converting that into beliefs about where prices are heading. And the price is jointly negotiated by all of the various people with proper economic interests. What what we're seeing today, and again for the last third to half a century, quarter to half century, is that increasingly we're able to use computers to put sometimes useful, but in many cases just meaningless information into marketplaces. And then because the markets are less stable, being able to charge more for security against market risk. And that has been the basic plot of how our financial institutions have grown over the last several decades.
What happens in your system, in your marketplace, if a new player enters and in order to attract business, undercuts everybody?
So within my system, the idea is to find prices which cause balance. So a new player entering will always cause undercutting because the system, which is presently balanced, will be thrown out of balance by new supply or new demand. And so that undercutting will always happen on that side. And so whether by undercutting that means trying to raise prices so that you can buy, or trying to lower prices so that you can sell, that undercutting process is always there. And because my system reflects whatever reality actually is, that undercutting will be public and general in order to get the market to equilibrium, to find new demand for new supply or new supply for new demand. And if it's economically possible for people to enter into the marketplace long-term under those circumstances, they will succeed. And if it is not economically possible for people to enter into the new marketplace long-term under those circumstances, they will fail.
Yeah, I was again thinking retail, you have a new store open up, their prices are ridiculously low, but they get a lot of traffic. They're not making a profit. Their grand opening sale ends, and then their prices are comparable to their competitors, maybe even a little higher to make up for the loss. And then whatever happens, happens.
Within the market system today, and within my market system even more especially, price competition isn't really a relevant thing that you can carry out in commodity product, because the margins are so thin, you will basically drive yourself out of business by attempting to do so. And the way my system actually works is by having flat pricing across the entire space. So there's no need essentially to lower your price to attract individual desire. If you can actually sustainably bring new demand to the marketplace, then the price will slightly lower, or new supply to the marketplace. The market will slightly lower in order to find the demand to accommodate for that, and it will come across the entire marketplace. If you are capable of doing that sustainably, you will potentially drive out very marginal players that were already there, that were just hanging on by their fingernails, or the market will actually be capable of being stable at a higher level of total transaction, at which point the economy is broadly better off because more production is actually occurring.
It's amazing how, regardless of the industry, the law of supply and demand remains the law of supply and demand. That never changes.
That's exactly correct, and that's why it's one of the foundations that I build on in my designs.
Now, you made a comment that surprised me a bit back. You were talking about cooperation and not competition.
Well, yeah, so that's a heavy distinguisher of my system, and it exists all over the place So if you have a wheat farmer and a baker, they have a cooperative relationship. Without the baker, the wheat farmer isn't really going to be able to sell their product, and without the wheat farmer, the baker isn't even going to have any product to make and sell. So our competition only style market structure that we presently use doesn't allow for taking advantage of those cooperative relationships. And what I've been able to do with that split into three pieces is emphasize those cooperative relationships across interest, while maintaining competitive behavior within interest. So all wheat farmers are competing with all other wheat farmers to produce as much wheat as possible at the prices that are available, and all bakers are competing with all other bakers to buy as much flour as possible at the prices that are available. But the farmers and the bakers have this forum within the marketplace in which they're cooperating in order to have successful, profitable businesses.
No, I want to share your contact information with our viewers. And I have one final question to ask you. Is there anything that I have not asked that you wish I had asked? And if I had asked, what would you have said?
Uh, you were actually pretty thorough. We could have gotten into the patent pending situation a little bit more. I'm having a unique experience with the patent office. They've said yes twice. The first time was 5 years ago. They've withdrawn both of those. Well, they ignored the first yes, and they've withdrawn the second yes for reasons that they've declined to share with the people who I'm actually allowed to communicate with. And so it's under appeal, and is scheduled to be heard July 2025. There's a petition outstanding on change.org. Anybody who would, like to support that, it's under CDM_patent on change.org.
I laughed when you said that because I intentionally didn't ask you anything about the patent office because I didn't think that you would want to publicly say anything that may be not taken positively by them. So I figured best to stay away from it.
Well, I thank you for your forbearance, but I've really gotten over that particular reticence at this point.
I was in a meeting and somebody was criticizing the IRS, at which point the lights started to flicker on and off. And I said, I just want to make it clear on my part that I have nothing against the IRS. I have nothing against the CIA. I have nothing against the FBI. I have nothing against the NSA. And the lights came back on and were stable, and everybody had a good laugh. So and I thank you for your patience. We had enough trouble at the beginning with my having lost internet connection. Let's stay away. Let's not look for any trouble.
Fair enough.
Noah, thank you so much for coming on. This has been interesting, and I appreciate you taking the time, and I wish you the best of luck with your current difficulties.
Thank you, Bruce. This was great.
I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.